There is a sound that plays beneath the surface of your waking life, a frequency so intimate and so precisely tuned to the architecture of your soul that most human beings spend entire decades never learning its name. It hums inside the marrow of your decisions, vibrates in the corridor between your instinct and your doubt, and pulses with the kind of sacred urgency that cannot be manufactured by any human mind. That sound is your signal. That sound is the broadcast heaven installed in you before your first breath ever broke the silence of a delivery room, before your mother's hands ever held the weight of what God had designed. And right now, in this precise moment of your reading, something has shifted in the spiritual atmosphere around your life. A seismic tremor too subtle for the untrained eye to catch, but absolutely unmistakable to the kind of soul that has been walking through fire long enough to recognize the smell of smoke before the flame ever appears. You have felt it. In the quiet hours when the house is dark and the phone is still and the noise of the day has finally surrendered to silence, you have felt this unnameable tension, this low-grade alarm that refuses to be silenced by logic or explained away by fatigue. That feeling is not anxiety. That feeling is not paranoia. That is your divine intelligence system sending a priority alert, and the alert carries a name, or rather, it carries an initial. The J influence in your life is not accidental, it is not neutral, and it is not finished, at least not yet, not until you receive the full intelligence report that heaven has been trying to deliver. You need to understand something foundational before anything else can make sense to you, before the layers of this spiritual operation can be peeled back and examined in the full light of revelation. The enemy of your soul is not a dramatic figure. He does not announce himself with thunder. He does not enter your life wearing a mask or carrying a sign that reads danger. He enters through familiarity. He enters through proximity. He enters through the faces of people who know your schedule, people who know your dreams, people who have sat at your kitchen table and watched you cry and offered you a tissue while secretly cataloging every vulnerability you exposed. The attack that is currently operating against your life is what the most seasoned spiritual warfare practitioners call frequency erosion, and it is among the most sophisticated weapons in the enemy's arsenal precisely because it does not feel like an attack at all. It feels like a misunderstanding. It feels like an off day. It feels like a personality clash or a communication breakdown or just the ordinary friction of human relationship. But underneath the civilian disguise, this is a precision operation designed to chip away at your internal signal, one dismissive comment, one subtle eye roll, one strategic withdrawal of energy at a time, and you have been living inside this erosion long enough that some days you cannot even remember what your frequency felt like before the static started. That memory loss is part of the attack. You won't dismantle this alone. The architecture of this kind of spiritual siege requires access to a higher code, which is exactly why I just released the 3 Keys to a Prosperous Life trilogy, whose unlocking link is in the pinned comment. Access it before the fog blinds you again, before another week passes and another layer of your signal gets buried beneath confusion you were never meant to carry. Frequency erosion operates through accumulated smallness, and that phrase deserves to sit in your chest for a moment before you read past it. Accumulated smallness. Not one catastrophic betrayal, not one undeniable act of malice that would give you clean permission to walk away and never look back. That would be too obvious. That would be too easy. The enemy is not interested in giving you obvious exits. He is interested in keeping you confused, keeping you second-guessing, keeping you suspended in that exhausting middle space between knowing something is wrong and not being able to articulate it clearly enough to justify your own discomfort. So instead of one large wound, you receive 1,000 paper cuts. the dismissive laugh when you share the dream that cost you sleep, the almost imperceptible change in their tone when you walk into the room carrying confidence. The way the conversation gets redirected, smoothly and without acknowledgement, every single time you begin to speak about your faith or your vision or the next level God has been mapping out for your life. These are not accidents. These are not the unconscious habits of someone who means well but communicates poorly. These are deliberate disruptions, executed with surgical precision by a human instrument who may not even be fully conscious of the spiritual assignment they are carrying. That is one of the most disorienting truths about spiritual warfare. The person being used does not always know they are being used. They are operating out of wounds so deep and so unexamined that the enemy can root a demolition agenda directly through their unhealed places without ever requiring their conscious cooperation. This does not absolve them, but it does require you to understand that your war is not against flesh and blood. Your war is against the assignment, not the person. And that distinction will save you from wasting emotional energy fighting a human battle in a terrain that demands spiritual weapons. Now let us excavate the mechanics of your own signal, because without understanding what you carry, you will never fully grasp why the attack came, why it came now, and why its timing is actually the most powerful confirmation of your promotion that you have received in months. Every single person who has been chosen, set apart, consecrated for a specific divine assignment on this earth, carries what the spiritual realm recognizes as a signal. This is not metaphor borrowed from technology. This is ancient spiritual law dressed in language your modern mind can access. You were engineered with a specific frequency, a unique broadcast that, when operating at full strength, functions like a divine antenna, attracting alignment, drawing resources, magnetizing the right relationships, pulling revelation directly from the throne room into your waking life. For years, perhaps decades, that signal operated at a manageable intensity, enough to sustain you, enough to keep you moving, but not yet powerful enough to draw significant opposition. And then something changed. God began accelerating the timeline. He began compressing seasons that were supposed to take years into windows of months. He began positioning you in rooms you had no natural explanation for entering. He began answering prayers that had been filed in your heart so long you had almost stopped believing they were still active. And as he did all of this, your signal intensified. It became louder. It became more disruptive to the spiritual atmosphere around you. And here is the intelligence that most people never receive, because receiving it requires a level of spiritual maturity that the enemy works overtime to prevent you from reaching. That intensified signal is detectable, not just by heaven, by both realms simultaneously. The moment your signal reached its current intensity, it triggered a response. Not from strangers, not from people on the periphery of your world, from the ones closest to you, specifically from the one whose name begins with J. And you noticed it, didn't you? You noticed the shift. It was subtle enough that you doubted yourself when you tried to name it, but unmistakable enough that it never fully left your awareness. There was a before and an after, and the dividing line between those two chapters of your relationship with this person was not a conflict or a conversation. The dividing line was your growth, your ascending, your refusal to stay contained within the dimensions they had unconsciously assigned you. The J influence in your life did not become problematic when you were stagnant. It became problematic when you started moving. That is not coincidence. That is enemy intelligence in real time, confirming your promotion through the very nature of its opposition. The enemy does not waste strategic resources on people who are not moving. He does not deploy sophisticated operations against souls who have already surrendered their frequency to complacency and fear. He moves against the future version of you. He moves against the one you are becoming. which means every moment of opposition you have endured from this direction has been, in the most profound and paradoxical sense, a military confirmation that God's investment in your next chapter is significant enough to warrant an enemy response. You are not under attack because you are weak. You are under attack because what God placed inside you is powerful enough to terrify the darkness. Let the weight of that land fully before you continue. You have been interpreting the resistance as evidence of your deficiency, proof that you are not yet ready, confirmation that the dream is too large for the vessel. But resistance of this caliber is not evidence of deficiency. It is intelligence. It is the spiritual realm's way of showing you a map of your own importance. The heavier the opposition, the more significant the territory being contested. And what is being contested right now is not your past. What is being contested is your next level, the chapter that God has already written, already approved, already resourced, already populated with relationships and revelations and breakthroughs that your current eyes have not yet been trained to see. The enemy read that chapter before you did. He saw what was waiting on the other side of your obedience. And the J influence is his attempt to prevent you from crossing the threshold. Understanding this transforms the entire emotional landscape of your situation. You are not a victim of someone's cruelty. You are the target of a failed spiritual operation because it is already failing, because you are receiving this intelligence. Because the moment an enemy strategy is exposed, it loses the only real power it ever had, which was the power of invisibility. Now enter the dream. You have had it. Maybe not every night, maybe not in the form of literal sleep imagery, but you have felt its emotional architecture pressing against your chest in waking hours with a familiarity that tells you this narrative lives somewhere deeper than your conscious mind. You are running. The urgency is absolute, the kind of urgency that bypasses rational calculation and goes straight to the animal brain, the part of you that was built to survive. Something is behind you or ahead of you or both simultaneously. The geometry of threat in this dream does not obey the ordinary rules of physical space, and your legs will not cooperate. They are moving, but not moving. Churning through the resistance of invisible substance, air that has thickened into something almost solid, forward momentum that produces no actual displacement. You are exerting maximum effort and generating zero progress, and in the terror of that paralysis, you can feel the thing you are running toward slipping further away, even as the thing you are fleeing draws closer. This is the dream of persecution. And it is not merely a psychological artifact of stress or unprocessed anxiety. It is a direct transmission from the spiritual realm, a nocturnal intelligence briefing from the part of your soul that has access to information your waking mind is still being protected from receiving all at once. The legs of lead are not symbolic of laziness. They are the physical sensation of a spiritual operation that has been weighing down your momentum, siphoning your energy through the open portal of the J connection, using the intimacy of proximity to create a drag on your frequency that no amount of personal discipline or positive thinking can fully overcome. Your body knows what your mind is still debating. The intrusive thought that accompanies this dream is not random. It arrives in the hollow aftermath of the nightmare, in that disoriented space between sleep and full consciousness where your defenses are lowest and your subconscious is most exposed. The thought sounds something like this. Maybe I'm not actually going anywhere. Maybe the sense of destiny I carry is self-deception. Maybe the ones who have always doubted me were seeing something I have been too proud or too afraid to acknowledge. That thought is not your thought. Let me be precise about that, because the enemy's most effective strategy is not to attack you from outside. It is to colonize your internal monologue and deliver his accusations in your own voice. That thought was planted. It was cultivated through repeated exposure to the J influence, watered by every dismissive comment and every subtle withdrawal of validation, and every moment where your excitement about your future was met with the kind of hollow response that deflates a room. The primitive memory being activated here goes back further than the J relationship. It goes back to the first time a trusted voice told you that you were too much, or not enough, or that wanting more was somehow a character flaw rather than a divine design feature. The J influence found that old wound and set up a strategic operation directly over it, because the enemy is an archaeologist of pain. He excavates what was buried, dusts it off, and presents it as current evidence. The spiritual action required in the face of this dream is not therapy, although therapy has its place and wisdom, and there is no shame in it. The spiritual action required is renunciation. You must renounce the agreement. Because here is what almost no one teaches in the modern church's conversation about spiritual warfare. The enemy cannot occupy territory in your life that you have not, consciously or unconsciously, granted him access to. Every time you rehearse the doubt, every time you entertained the possibility that the people diminishing your vision might be right, every time you silenced your own excitement to avoid making the J influence uncomfortable, you were signing a lease agreement. You are giving legal, spiritual access to a narrative that does not belong in your atmosphere. Renouncing that agreement does not require a dramatic ceremony. It requires a clear and deliberate internal declaration that you no longer recognize the authority of the voice that has been speaking that particular kind of diminishment over your life. The legs become unweighted. The running becomes movement. The dream ends, not with a dramatic rescue, but with a quiet, sovereign awakening. Now turn your attention to the smile that does not reach the eyes. You have seen it. You know exactly what it looks like on the face of the J influence, that particular configuration of the facial muscles that performs warmth, while the eyes remain cold, calculating and faintly hostile, in a way that would be impossible to prove in a court of human testimony, but is absolutely unmistakable to the soul that has been gifted with discernment. The poisoned compliment is among the most ancient weapons of interpersonal spiritual warfare, documented across cultures and centuries precisely because it is so devastatingly effective. It arrives wearing the costume of encouragement. It sounds, on the surface level, like affirmation, but embedded within the syntax of the praise is a payload of diminishment so precise and so expertly calibrated that by the time it detonates in your emotional system, you cannot easily trace the wound back to its origin. Someone who can't stand you has learned that outright hostility would expose them. It would remove their access. It would justify your distance. So instead, they have mastered the architecture of the backhanded compliment, the kind of praise that manages, in the very same breath as the elevation, to remind you of your ceiling. You are so much better than you used to be. That is remarkable for someone with your background. I am honestly surprised by how well this is going for you. As I teach deeply and relentlessly to those who arrive at the 3 Keys to a Prosperous Life trilogy, I've already left the link for you in the pinned comment. This particular weight on your chest that arrives after receiving what should have been encouragement is not ingratitude. It is your discernment working perfectly. The psychological warfare dimension of the poisoned compliment operates through what behavioral science calls covert invalidation, the systematic undermining of another person's self-concept through language that maintains plausible deniability. The narcissistically wounded individual who operates as a J influence in your life has likely spent years perfecting this instrument because their own pain requires them to keep you contained within a self-image that is slightly less than what you actually are. This is not abstract cruelty. This is the survival mechanism of a soul that has never confronted its own inadequacy and therefore must externalize it through the management of your perception of yourself. If you stay slightly smaller, they feel slightly larger. If your confidence remains slightly dimmed, the contrast between your light and their inner darkness remains bearable to them. The spiritual tribunal dimension of this action is severe. Every word spoken with the deliberate intention of keeping a chosen one small carries a weight in the eternal record that the speaker will one day be required to answer for. This is not a threat. This is the architecture of divine justice. Heaven keeps a precise account of every stone thrown at the vessel it has anointed. And the divine promotion hidden inside this poisoned environment is this: your ability to recognize the poison without becoming poisonous yourself is the development of a spiritual refinement that no comfortable, unchallenged season could ever produce. The gold does not discover its own purity in the comfort of its origin. It discovers it in the fire. There is another dimension of the J influence that must be addressed with the full clarity it deserves, because failing to name it clearly is itself a form of spiritual negligence. The J influence in your life does not simply want what you have. They want to be who you are. The blatant copy is not flattery, it is predatory mimicry operating from a place of profound spiritual disorientation. Watch the pattern carefully, because the pattern is more instructive than any single moment of imitation. After you share a vision, a plan, a language, a creative expression, a direction God has given specifically to you as a unique assignment, watch how long it takes before elements of that same vision appear in the J-influence's presentation of themselves to the world. Watch how your terminology migrates into their vocabulary. Watch how the aesthetic you have been developing, the spiritual posture you have been cultivating, the very flavor of your anointing begins appearing, slightly distorted, in their output. This is not coincidence. This is not inspiration. This is a form of spiritual identity theft, driven by the most devastating kind of emptiness, the emptiness of a person who does not know who God made them to be, and therefore must construct their identity from the borrowed pieces of someone else's divine design. The physical sensation that accompanies this discovery is visceral and specific, a hollow, nauseating drop in the stomach, not unlike the feeling of reaching for something precious and finding the space where it was empty, because something was taken. Not your idea, not your concept. Something more fundamental than that. The intrusive thought that arrives in the wake of discovering the copy is a trap, and you need to recognize it as such before it closes around you. The thought sounds like this: if they can do it, maybe it was never really mine to begin with. Maybe I did not have what I thought I had. Maybe the original idea was not as singular or as divinely specific as I believed. That thought is designed to make you abandon your frequency. It is designed to make you feel that the very thing that makes you unrepeatable is somehow ordinary, available, accessible to anyone who studies you long enough. Do not receive it. Your assignment is not diminished by imitation. Gold is not made less valuable because someone else attempts to construct an approximation of it from cheaper materials. The primitive memory activated in this moment goes back to the first time you made something, created something, became something, and watched someone absorb the credit or the concept or the aesthetic without acknowledgement. That old wound is being reopened strategically. The spiritual action required here is the radical commitment to originality without defensiveness. Keep creating from the depths of your specific assignment. Keep speaking from the particular place in God's heart where your voice was formed. The copy will always lag behind, because a copy can only mimic what it has already seen from you, while you are always operating from what God has not yet revealed to the world. Your next chapter cannot be copied. It has not been shared yet. Somewhere between 3 and 4 in the morning, the atmosphere in your room shifts. It is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is just a weight. A pressure that descends across your chest like something physical settling there, something with mass, something with intention. You know this experience. It has visited you enough times that you've developed a relationship with its particular signature. The way your breath becomes slightly shallower, the way your awareness sharpens into a hyper-lucidity that is somehow terrifying and crystalline simultaneously, the way your body registers something present in the room that your eyes cannot confirm and your rational mind immediately begins constructing explanations for. Sleep paralysis is not merely a neurological event. It is a nocturnal spiritual confrontation, and the frequency with which it visits you is directly correlated with the intensity of the spiritual operation being run against your life. The invisible operating that occurs in these pre-dawn hours is among the most ancient forms of spiritual warfare documented in the mystical traditions of virtually every major culture on this planet. There are those who pray against you in the darkness. There are those whose envy and resentment and spiritual disorientation generate a kind of energetic transmission that finds your frequency in sleep, when your conscious defenses are lowered and your spirit is most exposed. The weight on your chest is the physical sensation of an assignment pressing against your spiritual membrane, attempting to penetrate, attempting to deposit something, fear, confusion, a sense of doom that will trail you into your waking hours with no explicable origin. The intrusive thought that arrives in the paralysis is the most intimate and devastating of all the enemy's intrusions, because it arrives in the most undefended hour of your human experience. It whispers not in the abstract language of theological accusation, but in the precise surgical language of your deepest personal terror. It knows your name for your worst fear. It speaks it in the dark. And the primitive memory it accesses is the memory of the first time you felt genuinely existentially alone. The first time you understood that the universe is vast and you are small, and there is no guarantee that the love you need will arrive in time to matter. The spiritual action required in the paralysis is not struggle. Struggling against spiritual pressure amplifies it. The action required is declaration. Not a shouted, desperate declaration that reveals the presence of fear, but a quiet, sovereign, internally voiced declaration that names the blood covenant covering your life, that names the assignment God has placed on your existence, and that commands every unauthorized spiritual presence to vacate the territory of your atmosphere in the name of the authority that was established before the foundations of the world were laid. There have been nights when the lights in your space behaved in ways that could not be explained by the ordinary language of electrical infrastructure. A bulb burning out at a moment of extreme emotional peak. A device behaving erratically during a season of unusual spiritual pressure. These are not coincidences that polite society would allow you to name without social cost, but they are also not fabrications of an overactive imagination. The burned-out light bulb is a documented phenomenon in the intersection of extreme energetic states and electrical systems. And while the scientific framework for explaining it remains contested and incomplete, the experiential reality of it is confirmed across thousands of testimonies from people who, like you, would not have believed it if it had not happened in their own space with their own eyes. Material interference generated by stress and oppression spikes is one of the tangible signs that the spiritual operation against your life has reached a level of intensity that is bleeding through the membrane between the spiritual and the material. The physical sensation that accompanies this phenomenon is a specific kind of unease, not fear exactly, but the uncanny recognition that the rules of the ordinary world are thinner than you were taught. The intrusive thought that arrives in the wake of material interference is practical, but spiritually loaded. I cannot afford these constant breakdowns. Everything keeps falling apart. Nothing works when I need it most. That thought, if rehearsed often enough, becomes a narrative of chronic insufficiency, a story about being someone for whom things always go wrong, someone whose environment mirrors their inner chaos, someone perhaps not quite blessed enough for things to simply work. That narrative is a manufactured identity, and the J influence has likely reinforced it, perhaps not with dramatic statements, but with small, consistent contributions to the story of your difficulty, quiet agreements with your setbacks, that particular absence of the encouraging reframe that a true spiritual ally would offer without being asked. The primitive memory here is of scarcity, of watching resources fail at the worst possible moment and concluding something about your own worthiness that was never actually yours to conclude. The spiritual action is the activation of covenant provision, the deliberate, practiced internal turn from the language of lack to the language of divine supply, not as denial of difficulty, but as the choice to interpret difficulty through the lens of preparation rather than punishment. Every material disruption in the life of a chosen one is a preparation, clearing out what is old, creating space for what God is about to introduce. You know what it feels like when certain people enter a room, before they speak, before they make eye contact. Before any conventional social signal has been transmitted, something in the atmosphere of the space shifts, and something in you registers it, a subtle heaviness, a compression of the air, a barely perceptible dimming of the energy that had been present before the door opened. This is the silence in the room, and it is among the most deeply uncomfortable experiences in the spiritual life of a chosen one, because it requires you to trust a form of perception that the rational world has given you no language to defend. The heaviness in the atmosphere when envy enters the room is not imagination. It is the detection of a specific spiritual frequency, the frequency of covetous longing weaponized by pain that literally alters the energetic climate of a shared space. The J influence carries this frequency with a particular intensity, because their investment in keeping you small is proportional to how large they have perceived your destiny to be. They cannot sit in your presence without the dissonance between who you are becoming and who they need you to remain, generating a specific kind of spiritual friction that your discernment records without asking your permission. The physical sensation of this encounter is a specific kind of exhaustion that arrives not after but during the interaction. A draining that happens in real time, as though the presence of this particular energy is metabolically expensive in a way that ordinary social engagement simply is not. The intrusive thought is the question you never say out loud, because saying it out loud would feel dramatic. Why do I always feel worse after spending time with this person? Why does my atmosphere feel heavier? Why does the clarity I woke up with seem harder to access after this conversation? And here is the cruel precision of the enemy's operation. The J influence may, in isolated moments, perform genuine warmth, genuine humor, genuine connection, just enough to prevent you from being able to justify your own discomfort with clean, uncomplicated certainty. The primitive memory activated by this encounter is the memory of confusion in the presence of someone who was supposed to be safe. A childhood experience of feeling something was wrong in an environment that all the adult authority around you insisted was fine, which taught you to override your internal signal in favor of external social consensus. The spiritual action required is the rehabilitation of your discernment, the deliberate practice of honoring what you feel without requiring it to be defensible in the court of other people's perception. Your discernment is not a social liability. It is a military asset. There is a particular kind of betrayer